Oh wow, yay, another Marvel movie. Here's my review of Thor Ragnarok. Travelling through the cosmos to discover what the third act of his plotline in Age of Ultron is supposed to be, Thor spends 2 years in space just apparently dicking around doing random stuff. After arriving on Earth and seeking out Benedict Cumberbatch's help for an advert for the Blu-ray sales of Doctor Strange, Thor discovers that he has a sister he didn't know about, who's actually the god of death. A secret past of Asgard. Yeah, another secret past of Asgard. Forget about that being the plot of Thor and Thor the Dark World. While chasing her back to Asgard, Thor and Loki are thrown out of the Bifrost and onto a junk world, where he becomes a gladiator fighting in blood sports under the watchful eye of the boss of that planet, Jeff Goldblum. Did you enjoy the 80s? Because this film assumes that you thought that they were really cool. So, if you don't, then maybe you should watch Stranger Things and you should enjoy the 80s because they were 30 odd years ago now, so they're right in the nostalgia sweet spot. I'm going to carry on into spoiler territory here because honestly I don't think there's that much to spoil. If you haven't seen the film then you probably don't want to watch the rest of this. Thor discovers that Hulk is on this world. Yeah, that's what Bruce Banner's been up to, by the way, since Age of Ultron. I feel like I just wiped Age of Ultron totally from my memory. Either that or it was an incredibly bland fucking movie that everyone talked about at the time but then totally forgot about, which for me is kind of starting to be a bit of a pattern with the Marvel movies that aren't that good, but people don't really want to talk about Marvel movies being bad, do they? For some reason, people feel really strongly invested in arguing that these movies made by the biggest film company of all time and the biggest comics company of all time somehow need their help to defend themselves. After about an hour of dicking around in the gladiator arena with a healthy helping of New Zealander improv comedy, Thor and his brother set off back to Asgard, where they are somehow able to fight off the woman who they previously weren't able to fight at all. For reasons I'm not hugely clear on. Ba-bam! The end! And the post-credits scene for, I think, the 8th time since 2012 is, ooh, Thanos is coming. Everyone get ready to wet your knickers. There's going to be another movie about big space aliens attacking Earth. My enthusiasm for these films is waning. I feel like I've alluded to some of the problems with this movie in my little synopsis there, which I think was a little biased against the Marvel movies. But regular viewers of the channel will know that I haven't been impressed with their output for a while now. And if you want to know why that is, you can watch reviews like Captain America Civil War is the worst Marvel movie yet. I said yet, so that was a couple of years ago. And in my Doctor Strange review. And, well, I guess if you really want to see a reason why this movie sucks, then you could also watch my Suicide Squad review. You know, the thing is that Suicide Squad is a really bad movie. It took too long to do what it needed to do to start the movie. There was like 25 minutes of exposition at the start. The main baddie is this sort of angry elder god who has ill-defined powers that aren't really clear until the plot demands them to be, and then the goodies win anyway, somehow, regardless. There are whole sections of the movie that don't really contribute to the plot in any way, so you feel like you're sitting through filler that can occasionally be funny, but definitely isn't plot relevant, you know, in any sense. It didn't really pull me in any way with the directing, there wasn't anything there. It was a big studio picture that had taken a really promising director and then given him not much control over a franchise picture so they could kind of exploit the goodwill that he generated in his own work in order to make the movie seem more fun or original than it actually was. But hey, we all know that Suicide Squad's a bad movie, right? I mean, that much is obvious. I mean, it's terrible for the reasons I just outlined. And the real problem with that movie is that they hadn't built up a massive amount of goodwill based off having actually done good films before in the series. That was the real problem with Suicide Squad. What we shouldn't be doing is judging each individual film on its merits. We should instead pick a team and then argue vociferously for what we like instead of just saying, this movie's good, this movie's bad. Yeah, that's what we should do. So anyway, I don't really care what you think about Thor Ragnarok, to be frank. I think you should just make up your own opinions. So that, unfortunately, is it from me. Have a good one, and I'll see you later. Tom!
Yeah?
You can put the boiler on now, because I'm not doing the video.
You're not doing a review?
Yeah, I really feel like it's not worth doing them anymore, because I think that people don't really want to hear if they don't like the movie. They only want to read a review or hear a review when it's, wow, this Marvel movie's the best thing.
Okay, I need to stop with that. I don't need life story.
%93%. I will actually just say a couple more things, now that I think about it, because I really feel like there's a weird thing going on with critics and how they approach Marvel movies, and then with audiences and how they approach the movies as well. It doesn't really make much sense to me that you could have a movie that has all the same problems as, say, The Mummy, one of the worst films that came out this year, and it not be badly reviewed. Just consider the issues with The Mummy. You've got a villain, the Mummy herself, who comes out of nowhere, is evil apparently just because, and has magical powers that aren't ever really limited until the plot needs them to be limited. Well, that's one of your major problems with the structure of Thor Ragnarok. You've got this kind of misplaced tone that attempts to balance comedy with some kind of stakes and ultimately fails to do so in any really convincing way. And the whole first 20 minutes of the movie is really devoted to re-explaining its central premise for, I don't know, maybe the massive Chinese audience that these movies now have. It just seems like there's a lot of issues that are in Thor Ragnarok that are also in The Mummy. And yet, The Mummy is getting reviews like this one. Let's have a look-see. It feels less like a movie than a series of compromises worked out by a corporate committee. What does that remind you of? That, to me, sounds like the kind of thing you'd say about a movie that has an hour in the middle of it, which is the best bit of the movie, that isn't actually the central plot of the film. It's an example of where a movie is ultimately made by committee and not by the filmmakers. Let's have a look at another one and see what else people are saying. As the beginning of an ongoing series, it's an utter bore, one with only the faintest grasp of what made Universal's monster pictures so iconic. We could change a couple of words in that, and it seems like it fits pretty well for Thor Ragnarok. At the end of an ongoing series, it's an utter bore. I'm willing to say that Thor Ragnarok is probably the best of the Thor movies, but that's not exactly saying much, is it? Especially because, well, Thor 1 and Thor 2, The Dark World, are pretty boring films. Kenneth Branagh in particular, I don't think actually understands what people want from a superhero movie, because Thor 1 just kind of jumps all over the place, setting up characters, forgetting them, moving around. In fact, that does sound like Thor Ragnarok now that I say it. Here's Brian Lowry from CNN.com. The Mummy is a mess, a movie in such a hurry to introduce more monsters under Universal's Dark Universe banner that it comes across awkwardly wrapped in impenetrable layers of exposition. Well, for me, that was one of the biggest problems of Thor Ragnarok. I mean, the opening half hour of the film has like 3 or 4 plots begun and finished within it. You start off with Thor travelling the universe, getting stuck in a sort of like spacey version of hell with Surtur or whatever his name is, expositing what he's been up to for the last 2 years between this movie and the last one that he was in, which, let's not forget, his whole plotline was just an advert for this film. And then he goes back to Asgard and stops Loki from impersonating Thor, which was the big cliffhanger of the previous film. So granted, no one seems to remember Thor: The Dark World or how boring a movie it is, so fair enough for them for relitigating that. Then we go to Earth, we find Odin, and for some reason we spend about 5 minutes with Benedict Cumberbatch before anything can be done, a thing that could be completely resolved by just sending them straight to where Odin is in Norway. And then Odin dies, and immediately the villain shows up. She freaks out, attacks them, they get fucked up, then they fly into space, and then they get thrown out of a tunnel in time or space, and the Bifrost, and then there's an hour of the movie that has nothing to do with anything else before we get back to that plot. To me, that's something that I would call a beginning of a film that comes, how was it Brian Lowry put it, awkwardly wrapped in impenetrable layers of exposition. I think I found probably the most accurate review of all of them, one that really sits with how I feel about Thor Ragnarok. The Mummy labours under its formula, but there is some genuinely fun stuff in it. After all, the movie, for all of its structural problems, is something that makes people laugh. They kind of go into the cinema and forget who they are for 2 hours. I think that's a fair enough reason to enjoy a thing, but it's not enough of a reason to recommend it to other people. And when you have really good reviewers, people like Richard Roper, recommending this film, I don't know what's gone wrong with critics, that they're so willing to give a free pass to the Marvel movies for the same issues that they say plague modern blockbusters. Thor Ragnarok, ladies and gentlemen. The 17th film in the series that it's based on, produced by one of the biggest comics companies in the world and the biggest film company in the world. And they couldn't produce a film that's funnier or has more jokes than an early episode of Family Guy and is less thrilling than an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And that says a lot. So Thor Ragnarok, another disappointment from a movie studio that used to make good movies and is slowly ruining all my favourite young independent directors. Cheers. Have a good one. Bye for now.